Okay, so for today then, the main things that I wanted to go over is this introduction to the R environment, R versus other statistical softwares. Some of you have already mentioned that you're familiar with some of those. And then the last thing is installing or updating R in Rstudio. And so what I've found in the past is that some students have been using R, but they're interested in upgrading to the latest version. And the same goes with Rstudio. So Rstudio released a new version just yesterday. And some of you that are downloading it for the first time will have that new version. And if there's anyone that's been using it for a while, you may want to know how to download the newest version. And so we'll cover that today, okay? So R, as you all know, is an open source public domain programming language. What that means is there's no cost associated with R. And I think that's one of the main reasons that it's becoming widely used. Even in our discussions as a class on Tuesday, you know, some folks had mentioned that you're interested in learning R because you don't have access to license for some of the proprietary softwares. But the thing about R is that it's more than just a statistical program. We call it an environment because you can do much more than just analyses in there. We'll go over some of those things over the course of the semester. But the main things that R is typically used for is data handling and storage. Some of the first stuff that we'll go over in this course is how to manipulate data in R. Of course, it's an analysis tool, and there's a huge number of analyses that R is capable of doing. We'll talk about some of those today. It's not going to be an exhaustive list. There's always more that R is capable of doing, and we'll talk about how it's able to do so many diverse functions. Graphing is another one of the reasons that some of you mentioned you were interested in this class. And we'll spend some time in an R package called ggplot. The grammar of graphics, that's the GG part. This has kind of become a widely used way of creating plots. And so we'll spend some time on creating graphics. And there are R packages that are specifically for creating publication-worthy graphics. So you can create the graphics that you want to use in your peer-reviewed publications in R. And we'll discuss packages over the course of the semester that allow you to do that. And then, of course, one of the reasons it's so powerful is R is based on a programming language that allows for doing these multiple functions. And if you learn the language, you actually, I think, become you know, much more in tune with the cutting edge methods. I think learning to program in R helped me to become a better ecologist. And my hope is that learning to program in R improves the skill sets for each of you, okay? And that's what this class is here to help you do. So one of the reasons that R can do such a broad range of functions is it relies on these packages. And throughout the semester, we're going to be talking about specific or particular packages that fit the analysis needs that each of you are interested in. And these packages are stored in this comprehensive R archiving network, or the CRAN. And so later today, when we go through the steps for downloading R, you're going to have to choose a CRAN mirror. And what that means is there's these particular institutions that have allocated space to hosting a mirror of the current CRAN. And so you can go on to those CRAN mirrors. You can download the R. And then once you have an internet connection, you can go on and you can download particular packages from the CRAN, okay? Most of the packages that have been developed and peer-reviewed are on the CRAN. There are some packages that are put on what's referred to as GitHub. And these may be new packages that are still underdeveloped. You can use them, but they haven't been subjected through the checks that are required before R allows them to be put onto the CRAN. And so we'll go through how to grab packages off of GitHub, but typically we stick to the really stable packages that have been deposited onto the CRAN, okay? So you'll see that CRAN a lot. I just wanted to give you some background on what it means. So there's ways of searching for packages. We're going to go over that next week, but you know, there's a lot of resources out there on the internet that allow for searching for packages. One of the other benefits of R is there's a huge user community out there. And so what that means is there's a lot of people that are developing packages for R and making those available. But there's also a lot of people that may be in your shoes that are searching for particular packages or interested in a particular analysis and they need help finding a package to run that analysis. That's what some of these search engines that I've given you links to on the screen here represent, okay? And the one that you might use or remember because of the name is this crantastic.org. That's a search engine that's pretty helpful for searching by either package name or some of the functions that are housed within that package, okay? So we mentioned that R is a programming language. It's based largely on the previous language S. This allows for editing and storing code. If you were to use just R, we'll go through all of the windows that are used in RStudio, but one of those is just the R console. And so you can code directly into the console, but the challenge with that is that most of the time you want to archive your code, you want to edit that code, and you want to do that in a way that you're not doing it line by line. And so we use an add-on. There's two of them. There's R Commander and there's Rstudio. R Commander was implemented to access basic R packages, and it's a graphical user interface, sometimes called a GUI. And then there's Rstudio, and we're going to focus on Rstudio. Okay, let me turn these lights back on. Okay, so just be aware that R Commander exists if you kind of take the deep dive into R, but Rstudio is much more user-friendly and is pretty widely used. So we're going to focus on Rstudio, okay? And some of the benefits of Rstudio is that it automatically creates a plotting window for you. It can store information in the environment. It tells you about the history. We're going to go through all of the basics of Rstudio next week, okay? And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's a large community of users out there, and I just gave you some of the main places you can go for help or new information about R. Most of the time, what I've noticed is that if you're running a package and you get an error code, you can copy that error code and paste it into Google or into any online search engine, and most of the time it will automatically take you to some of these Stack Overflows or R Blogger pages. So there's multiple ways of getting help, but these are just a few of those. One of the things I like to focus on in this course is the internal help structure that's built into packages. So once we start getting into particular packages, we're going to spend a lot of time thinking about how to use the internal help structure so that you know how to use that new package before you have to go to some of these online resources. But I wanted you to be aware that those online resources exist, okay? Okay, so the second part of the lecture today then is just kind of recognizing R and how it kind of fits within the broader landscape of statistical packages that exist out there. And this plot here just shows, this is the number of scholarly articles in 2018 that cited each of these statistical packages, okay? And I've given you a link to where I pulled this from, this article, The Popularity of Data Science Software. So you could go there, and there's a lot more information than what I'm going to share with you today. But the main point is, some of you have already mentioned that you're familiar with JMP, for example. Some may have used MATLAB or Python or SAS. And SPSS is still the leader in terms of the number of publications that use that as the primary analytical method. But notice R is a close second, and this represents a growth of the use of R over the past several decades. So if you go down to the next page, here's a time series of how these rankings have changed, starting in 95 and going, in this case, through 2016. And R is shown as this orange here, and so notice there's this kind of consistent increase in R. Even though SPSS was much broadly used, there's been a decline in the use of that as particularly R has increased in recent days, and recent years. And if we zoom in on just this part, that's what this is showing. So here's R taking over as the surpassing SAS in this case as the primary method of statistical analyses in peer-reviewed publications. Okay, so you're learning to use a programming language that is already well integrated into the peer-reviewed literature. And I know from most of you, if not all of you, in this class, you know, the ultimate goal of your research is to deposit that into the peer-reviewed literature. And so certainly R is going to help you to do that in understanding R. And one of the reasons that R is increasing in its use is because of the flexibility and the wide variety of statistical packages or statistical analyses that are available in R. And so here I'm just giving you the source of this table that we're going to briefly go through. But what it's comparing is R, MATLAB, SAS, Strata, and SPSS, the most broadly used one. And then there's this cross-section of statistical analyses. Some of you have already indicated that you're interested in things like ANOVA or ANCOVA or t-test. You can use a variety of softwares to do these, obviously. R is the free one, but R is also the one that has the most flexibility. So a yes would indicate that you can run that analysis using that software. Limited means that you have limited control over the functions. And then 10 plus code means that you can run that analysis, but it's going to take pretty extensive coding to do it. And notice that R, with the packages that have been developed, a lot of these are just yeses. There's still some really sophisticated stuff that you might have to do 10 plus lines of coding on, but packages are being developed to do these Markov chain Monte Carlos, particular to the types of model that you want to fit. And so the idea here is just to show you some of the, beginning with really simple stuff, what we refer to as parametric statistics, where we're using a normal error distribution. Then we can go into non-parametric statistics, and we can do even mixed effects models, all the way into multivariate analysis. So I know some of you are interested in principal components analysis, for example. It's really straightforward to run these in R, and in this semester I'm going to show you how to do those analyses. Okay? So you know, this is not primarily a statistics class. This is a class where we're focused on applied statistics, particularly through R, and then related to the various fields of research that each of you are doing. So when we run these analyses in R, I'll give you kind of the main points, the limitations and assumptions of these statistics. But in this class, we don't spend a lot of time going into the theory behind these statistics. Okay, it's much more of an applied class than that. Okay. So more on our particular analyses later, but the point of this table is that R can do almost anything that you might be interested in doing. Okay. So Lindsay Elkins asks, is there a benefit to using R Commander over Rstudio? So yeah, Lindsay, the main benefit, if we go back up here, sorry, I just saw that in the chat. The main benefit is this graphic user interface. If you're used to kind of point and click type things where you don't have to be running lines of code for particular functions, R Commander is beneficial in that way. Okay. But what it doesn't have is some of the other features that Rstudio has in terms of automatic plotting windows, exporting data, or exporting figures. There's a lot more that you can do with Rstudio. That's why we focus on it in this class. But one of the benefits of R Commander is it's a little bit more user-friendly than Rstudio if you were to just walk into using it. Of course, that doesn't really affect everyone in this class, because I'm going to take the time to show you how to use Rstudio and what the major functions in Rstudio are. Okay. Everyone else doing all right? Okay, well, then the last thing is, won't be much of a hurdle for some of you, but for those that are walking into this just totally new, this is a pretty important step that I wanted to make sure that we take the time to talk about. So I'll go through these screen grabs for installation and updating, then I'll probably stop the recording, and I want to just work one-on-one with each of you before you leave today to make sure that you have access to R and RStudio before we come back next week and actually start to do some real coding, okay? So just as a brief overview, if you're installing R for the first time, it's available online. It's www.r-project.org. When you visit that web page, this is what's going to come up. It'll show you the R project for statistical computing. On the left side under download, there's the CRAN, which we now know stands for Comprehensive R Archiving Network. And if you select that CRAN, it'll take you to the download and install R page. And that's what this screen grab is showing. And of course, the version of R that you'll want to download will be dependent on the user interface or the system, the operating system that you're using. Typically, the majority of users in this class are using Windows machines. That's what's available here in the teaching lab. But there's always, you know, maybe a third or so of the class that are using iOS or Mac systems, okay? And I can see there's at least one person here today that's using that. So you want to select the appropriate operating system and download that. There are very minute details between how R is used across those operating systems. And I like having in the class people that are using Macs because we can ensure that the code that we're developing works across those systems. Okay, so we'll be focusing on Mac and Windows, but there should be consistency across those operating systems in terms of what R looks like and how you run code in R. Okay, so everyone will want to download that. Some of you already have, and below I'm going to show you how to update it. Okay, the second thing that you'll need to download is this RStudio. So if you go to rstudio.com, products, RStudio download, you should scroll down and see this. And there's multiple levels of RStudio that are available. For this class, and even for my own research at this R1 institution, we just use RStudio Desktop, the free version. Okay, so you can click on download for that, and that'll download RStudio. Next week, we're going to start, once everyone has this downloaded, these both downloaded on their machines, we're going to go into understanding how those two things interface with each other. And I'll just tell you now that once you have RStudio downloaded, it automatically links to R. So you don't have to open R and then RStudio. You just open RStudio and it'll open an R console for you, okay? And there'll be more detail on that next week. Just go ahead and download it for now, okay? For those that may have used R before, I know some said that they have participated in the open source, open science workshop that happens here at Texas A&M every year. If you did that last year or last fall, you may be using an older version of R or RStudio, and maybe you want to update that. For updating R, you can do that. For updating RStudio, you can do that through RStudio. I've given you the kind of steps for that. When you go to next week, I can show you how to do this once you're in RStudio. But if you want to try and do it before then, just open RStudio, go to the Help tab on the top, select Check for Updates. And when you run that, it'll either say no updates available, you're using the newest version of RStudio, or it will say RStudio, the next version is now available, and it'll tell you the version that you're using. And you can choose to ignore that update, or if you want to use the most updated version, you can click on this quit and download, and it'll take you step by step through the process of updating to the newest RStudio. And as I said, they just updated it yesterday, so probably everyone may want to go through this. There's not a lot of changes there. If you want to stick with the version of RStudio that you've been using, there shouldn't be any issues that I'm aware of currently, one day into the new version being out, okay? Okay, then if you've used R before, you may have an older version of R on your computer. This is one of the criticisms of R in terms of reproducible science. Typically, you want to create an R script that gives an output, an answer to a statistical analysis, and you want that to be reproducible far into the future. You want to, in many cases, maybe submit that to the journal as an appendix so that other users can download it and use it. And one of the criticisms of R is that there's a lot of broken code out there because of updates and packages and updates to R versions. And there's a recent package that just came out called Groundhog that we're going to talk about and use this semester that will allow you to develop code at the most recent package and most recent version of R, but it will also make that code available in the future by linking patches and changes that happen. Okay, so we're going to be introducing this package Groundhog early on that addresses this criticism of R and all of the broken code that exists out there. Okay, so if you're in this class and you're thinking, well, I've got a bunch of code that I've developed over an older version of R, I'm not sure I want to move to the new version of R. Fair enough. I would advocate move to the newest version of R because that's what I'll be using to instruct the course. But then, you know, pay attention to the day that we go over the package Groundhog so that you can use that older code that you've archived and it'll still be useful for you. Okay. And then there's just a screen grab for installing R if you're using a Windows operating system here. Okay, so if you're using Windows, you can go to Tools, Install Packages. You can go to the CRAN, and you can load this install R right here, and then you can actually do it from the R console. Okay, if you're using a Windows machine. If you're using a Mac operating system, you basically just have to go through the new process of downloading it from the rproject.org. Okay. Okay, are there any questions related to any of that? We can talk about those briefly before I stop the recording. You never know how the question that you have might benefit other students. So if you've got a burning question, let's talk about it as a group. And then once we get through those, then we can kind of break out and just go one-on-one and make sure that each of you have these on the machine that you choose to use for the duration of the semester.
My question isn't specifically about R, but I wanted to check for those required readings on the syllabus, will those just be posted up onto Canvas?
Oh, very good question. Yeah. So yeah, for each week I did put a paper on there, and I will post those papers to Canvas so that you all have access to them. There is one book that we're using, Numerical Ecology in R, and there's particular chapters that we're going to focus on. And I'll make those available to each of you through Canvas as well. Yeah, good question. I recognize, you know, most of you that are on main campus, you have access to almost anything you want through the library, but I know that's not the case for everyone in the course. So I'll make those available to you through Canvas. Okay, everyone else is good? Okay, let me stop sharing. And then I'm going to stop recording. And let's see.